Well, we'll get started a little bit slowly here as folks sort of filter in. First, I want to welcome everybody to our virtual project open house. Every year, we hold a project open house to talk about improvements to key infrastructure. So again, this year, we're going to do a virtual one, and we're going to hold it over the next 4 Fridays. So each Friday at noon for the next 4 weeks through March, we're going to talk about a few different projects focused throughout the month. Today we're talking about parks and both plans and improvements there. On the 12th, next Friday, we'll talk about Rancho Way, those improvements from Zeller to Hawkeye Drive, which is going to include widening as well as pedestrian improvements such as a trail, side paths, and another underpass. On March 19th, we'll be talking about Dubuque Street and the realignment there at Front and Cherry Streets with improved sight lines and pedestrian features. And then March 26th, we'll be talking about City Hall and the future civic campus there along Cherry Street in that area. You can, of course, sign up for those. You've all made it here, so you know where to find that, but you can find that at northlibertyiowa.org/projects. You can sign up and get more information there, as well as sign up for future webinars. Today, again, we're talking about parks and plans and improvements, and I want to introduce the project team that we'll be talking with today, and let them also sort of just briefly introduce themselves. As we go, of course, if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, there is the Q&A box there. Just let those, we'll have some time at the end for those. Just drop in those questions that you have there. So we'll start. I wanted to introduce Guy Goldsmith. He's our Parks Director. Hi, Guy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon.
Our Planning Director, Ryan Rusnak, is here.
Hi, good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
And our city engineer, Kevin Trom, who works for Shive-Hattery, but has been involved in city projects here in North Liberty for a long time. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
All right, I'm going to go back to my screen here. So we're going to be talking about 3 areas today. The first, we're going to talk about Penn Meadows Park. That's up there at number 1. We're going to be talking about some projects at Centennial Park. That's number 2. And then we're going to be talking about a trail project, but we'll also be talking more generally about trails. The improvements for this year are at the 3 down there on Forever Green. But before we get into specific projects, I did want to come back to Ryan and talk a little bit about what the value of parks and trails and all of these sorts of amenities. What does that mean to a community? Why, as a planner, how do you approach that?
Well, thanks, Nick. I'll tell you that a couple of things that struck me when I first came to North Liberty were, the community center that a town this size has, extensive off-road trail network, and 2 very large, community parks, being Centennial Park and Penn Meadows. And kind of, my role as a city planner is I take a kind of a broad look at the community and see how buildings, roads, parks, and trails and those things kind of fit together like pieces of a puzzle. And so we spent a great deal of time just kind of looking at the city to see how these things can be arranged to fit together. Let me start with trails. With respect to kind of off-street trails, I think we could all agree that dedicated trails are safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, and I mean, this is particularly important for us because we have so many families with young children, and the one thing that you can say is that our community trails get used quite a bit, and I'm going to argue they get used a lot because we have trails, not necessarily because the demand was there and we created it. It's because we've invested so much in these trails that it makes it easier for people to use these trails. And I saw a lot of people just yesterday with the weather being so nice already out there. And so when people are out there riding the bikes, walking, I mean, obviously it leads to a healthier community. The one thing, the upside of being a newer community is we're able to incorporate trails when we're constructing or reconstructing older streets. Excellent example is St. Andrews Drive. The trails extend from Centennial all the way to the Kansas Avenue Trail. Significant investment that the city made and a wonderful one. if you visit a lot of older communities, you'll see that a lot of times right now they're trying to retrofit kind of these trails into the roadway system, and a lot of times they're barricaded, but these become very challenging and expensive. And so we're very fortunate when we're developing new roads that we can just go ahead and plan and design these off-road trails into the design. With respect to parks, I mean, obviously parks serve the recreational needs of both kids and adults, but obviously there's a lot more to it. There's studies that show communities with more land dedicated to park have residents report higher levels of well-being. And as a planner, when you talk about community planning, I want to see spaces where people can actually come together and connect. I know that's been tough with COVID, but hopefully we're kind of seeing a world beyond that, hopefully. When people interact with each other, they create friendships, and this forms the basis of really what a community is. And when I think about park space, right, a parent goes down to a park, they're able to they feel safe letting their kids just run around. This maybe causes them to strike up a conversation with somebody they didn't know, or they casually knew, or maybe they saw their neighbor, and really it makes these connections. And so I love spaces that really bring people together and allow them to connect. And I think we see this, it's not necessarily kids, but some dogs are kids, right? I think we're going to start to see this at the new dog park, and I think we're already seeing it, right? You're letting your dog run free, and you strike up a conversation with the person next to you, and maybe you've seen them a couple of times. The one thing that I really think is missed sometimes is the economic impacts of parks and trails to a community, and you might pause and say, well, how can there be economic impacts to a city like North Liberty having so many parks and trails? But I think a lot of people would agree that North Liberty is a highly desirable place to live. And so when you have amenities that serve those residents like parks and trails, it's really one of the reasons. It's obviously a family-friendly place, but I think people also gravitate to North Liberty because we have wonderful parks, we have this recreation facility, and we have these amazing off-street trails.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. And so obviously, the city has invested a lot of time, and we've got plans for these parks and for our trail network. So we're going to talk let's start talking about some of these projects. We're going to move back over here let's start talking about Penn Meadows Park. This is an aerial view. These are from 2019. You can tell because there's not yet a roundabout here, for example. But I want to bring Guy Goldsmith into this conversation so we can talk a little bit about what we've got planned specifically for this year at Penn Meadows Park, and then talk a little bit more about what that long-term plan is. Guy, can you talk us through sort of what the plan for the improvements this year are first?
You bet. Thanks, Nick. The improvements that have been relatively approved for this coming up fiscal year is the tennis court. The tennis court was built back in, I believe, 2006. It really has not had any sort of surface renovations since then. It's just been repainted. So it is gotten to the point where we need to do an overlay, which is putting an asphalt overlay over it to make the surface playable. And in the process of doing that, we're going to try to accomplish a couple goals. We're going to try to maybe level it out a little bit. It has a pretty good slope, which is good for drainage, but not so great for example, our ice rink that we put on it in the wintertime. Yeah. And secondly, we have a very strong group of organization of pickleball people, and we see a lot of usage from there, more so than just tennis. So we're actually going to take half of that court, and which would be 2 tennis courts, and convert that over to permanent 6 courts of pickleball for the pickleballers. So it's going to change a little bit, but we're going to try to accommodate a different group of people.
That's right, Guy. And I apologize. You actually sent me a layout of it, and I failed to put that in here.
No,
but
okay.
As you can see, sort of down there, the bottom center of the screen is where the tennis courts are. We're talking about converting 2 of those tennis courts into, is it 6 pickleball? Yeah,
that's correct.
Great. And pickleball players are currently using those courts sort of in a makeshift fashion and have been for a while. Is that correct?
That is correct. They have temporary nets that they actually bring out and set up. So these would actually be dedicated for pickleball. They would have the nets already set up, so it would be a lot less setup time for the people when they arrive.
Great. So while this project is happening, presumably the courts will be we won't be able to go and play tennis while they're doing an overlay or pickleball. What's that timeline looking like as far as getting this project off the ground and started and finished?
It's really gonna come down to contractor availability. We're just now beginning to solicit contractors to see what the time frame could be. But I'm assuming, and it's going to have to be after July 1 because that's when the new fiscal year budget begins.
Yeah.
So sometime after July 1, if we can get a contractor in, I would say it would probably take about a month's time probably to wrap it all up, to get it in there and get it done back in.
Okay. And so this is a relatively small sort of, we've been making improvements at Penn Meadows Park over the last several years. Concession stand, tot lot, splash pad. So if it's okay with you, let's. I just want to move over to the master plan, which again, this is a few years old now. We've sort of talked about this. This is Penn Meadows Park. This is sort of the master plan that we've been working on and adding to. Right, it identified the concession stand, which is now a more permanent feature. It identifies the splash pad. What other items out in here are worth calling out, Guy?
One of the big ones that has been pulled, but it's in the near future, and that is parking lot expansion. Everyone knows that whoever uses that park for baseball or softball in the summertime knows that parking is a premium. So we're looking at adding parking to the west side of the existing north parking lot. And while doing that, we also are looking at doing some maintenance also with the original north parking lot by doing an overlay on that and getting that back where it needs to be. But saying that, we also are debating if we should do parking lot lighting for the possibility of future field lighting. That has always been discussed. It's been discussed for many, many years, field lighting, but just has not gained any traction. I do believe there is a need for it, especially as this town grows. We might be able to utilize those fields a little longer without having to build new additional fields, which takes land. Yeah. So those are two of the main projects that we're looking at. That, and of course on the southwest side, which Nick will get into this with another project. It's the Dubuque Street project, which will definitely change the looks of the south end of Penn Meadows Park.
That southwest corner. Yeah, we're going to talk about that Dubuque Street realignment. We're excited. It'll offer some pedestrian features. It will just to make some of those sight lines a little bit easier, and whether it's school traffic or something else. Kevin can talk maybe a little bit to it, but there will be some changes in that southwest corner. That's a couple years out still, but as part of that project, and we're talking about that project, so everybody remembers in 2 weeks. Kevin, are there what sort of limitations, when you folks approach a parks project, what are the constraints that you're typically dealing with as you work through those?
Well, I'd say it's mainly the users, on the Parks Board and Guy and his staff, what they need to stay open at any given time. I actually look forward to doing parks projects because they're I'd say they're easier than street reconstruction, because the street reconstruction impacts so many different property owners, every single property along the way. The parks doesn't do that. We don't have to do acquisitions, so I kind of look forward to doing parks projects. But definitely consider the existing uses in the park and how it's going to affect existing uses.
Great. And of course, the best time to do park construction tends to be the best time to use parks. That's one of the downsides. It's not like you can work through late November in quite the same way that you can with a road project. I did so. This is an estimated about $155,000 project. Obviously, there's a lot of other things on the sort of the Penn Meadows Park wish list, and we continue to work through those through the capital improvements plan. I'd like to, unless there's something else that somebody'd like to add, move on to Centennial Park, if that's okay. Centennial Park is number 2 on this sheet. And this year, what we've done some past improvements. Here's the current conditions. Again, this is from 2019. So St. Andrews Drive along that north side has been rebuilt, and you can tell this is old. Again, there is no roundabout in this photo, but there is a roundabout there now. But this is the current state. And so Guy, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing here. Hopefully this fall. But depending again on contractor availability, these even though they're big projects, they're much smaller than a lot of contractors take on. This isn't a big road project, so there is some of that. Guy, what are we talking about doing here at Centennial Park? Hopefully this year.
All right. Well, this fiscal year we are looking at finishing the driveway loop. It will kind of follow along the trail that is existing and loop back around and tie into the other side of Centennial Park. And in doing so, we're going to have some, I guess, what you'd call off the driveway parking for future shelters. So people can actually drive to the back side of the park, which I call the south side is the back side. And there will be some shelters that people can reserve and use, and it just should open up that park quite a bit, just to bring people into it. And it will also be very beneficial when we host Blues and Barbecue in July for getting cars throughout that park and utilized for parking.
Yeah. Well, great. So here I've done a mock-up for everybody. That little red line is where it'll go. You can kind of see sticking off the right-hand side, that's the east side of the park, where Guy has sort of built we call it the Mulch Highway that we use. We get it's a big pile of mulch spread through there to get cars in there during Blues and Barbecue. But this is the rest of the road. This will loop all the way around.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but this road will have a rollover edge on it, so it will not have a traditional curb edge. It will have a rollover edge that is just a mild curve that you can actually drive over.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of a combination between a street and a driveway. So it's 26 foot wide, and it'll be concrete, and it'll look just like the other roads in the park. I think this is, what do you call this, phase 4 of the master plan implementation, Guy? I know we did the pond first, and then the drive on the west side. And then we did the permeable paver parking lot and bioswale. And then you came back and did the rock climbing area and the playground. Would that be phase 3? So this would be phase 4. The road itself is about a third of a mile. The project is estimated currently somewhere between $620,000 and $650,000 total project cost. And then this one, design hasn't started yet, but we're planning on starting soon, and our hope is to bid this thing in the summer of 2021, and then actually hopefully we'll have a decent fall and get started construction in this fall, and then complete it in the spring of 2022. Not knowing what the bid prices are going to be in the middle of summer, we don't know. It's kind of a gamble, but we can always just reject the bids if we think they're too high, and then rebid it in the winter, and then start work in the summer. I know Guy and the Parks Board would like it started this fall because of COVID, and we wouldn't have Blues and Barbecue, so it'd be a great year to get that loop road done. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and we've talked about when this will happen. Because as far as the master plan goes, which I think I've got on the next slide here, because that'll help enable some of those other additions that we've talked about before. Now, this was the original master plan for this park. Again, we've held really pretty true to it. There's been maybe some small adjustments to it. This is back before it was called Centennial Park, and it was just called West Side Park. So we didn't have a better name for it. So it was carrying that name for a while. So, Guy, can we talk maybe a little bit about what some of these additional future plans for this park are, and why the road makes sense now because it'll allow construction of those other pieces and access to those other pieces. So let's talk maybe a little bit about what those pieces are.
Some of the additional future is what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're hoping that one of our near future would be the construction of the stage, theater, and restroom facility, and a building that goes along with that, shelter, basically enclosed shelter that would house, I guess, maybe 300 people, 300 to 400 people. It'd be great for a reception, things of those natures, meetings.
Yeah.
But in conjunction with that project, we're going to try to loop in the 5,000 square foot splash pad that we have been proposing. As everyone knows, our aquatics has been very strained with capacity, and this has been determined to be one of the means to satisfy that need, is to put a splash pad in different parks, and Centennial Park has been slated in to have one. So, but it's going to be a little more on a larger size, just because it's definitely a destination park.
Yeah.
So that's one. Another one is a gazebo over by the pond area, which is dictated in this picture here. And maybe a veterans memorial to go along with that. We can envision maybe like a small wedding ceremony or something happening there, and then they can move right on over to the big building for like a reception. Another small project, which I still want to add on to the playground. We have the rock climbing area, of course. We have the traditional playground. We just put in a top lot, but we're also looking at putting along with the top lot more of a special needs playground, which would have more of something that would be wheelchair accessible, as far as like a swing or something that you can actually roll the wheelchair right up into it. We've been getting a lot of requests from schools wanting this, so we have definitely been looking into that. We've saved enough room to actually add that feature in. So I'm hoping that to be a near future project.
That sounds great. And you mentioned the sort of the amphitheater. A few years ago, we worked with some University of Iowa students to come up with a concept. We pulled a few of the renderings that they put together there. Again, we have sort of these concepts. The idea would be it could be used as a conference center with this nice interior space. It would have a stage built onto it that could be used for things like blues and barbecue or other music in the park. It would provide restroom facilities for the park, as well as the facilities that we would need in order to have to power that splash pad. That's there. So it's in the CIP. It's something that we've talked about before. We don't have a strong timeline on it. That is a key piece, a showcase that we wanted for that park. So let's move on to the last item on our agenda before we open it up for questions, and that's down at number 3 is where the actual work this summer is taking place. But we're talking about some trails. Here's the current, again, not the current conditions. There's no roundabout here that is missing, but the trail is you can see where they're doing that construction from the Forever Green Road project. Let's talk a little bit. So here's the rendering, and this is to solve some drainage issues, right, Guy? Can you talk specifically about this one? This isn't a super exciting project; it's a necessary one, but talk a little bit about what we're doing here.
Sure, you bet. Now, this trail was put in with the Fox Valley development before all these homes were built, and which was great. It loops around the pond, and it was a great feature to bring people there to build. But since these homes have built, there's been a lot of elevation change, and all these backyards slope right down to the trail. So we get a lot of drainage from the roof, from snow melting, and it all seeps across the trail. So during the summertime, it's always wet. It becomes kind of a slimy green. It gets slippery. In the wintertime, it's always thaw and freeze. So we're always having to address those for hazards. So this project, we determined to be a very high priority because of safety. So we're planning on elevating the trail, maybe taking it to the north a bit to give us some space between the resident property and the trail as kind of a water collector. So we're going to try to collect that water, send it down more to the side of the trail and then underneath and into a culvert. I'm sure Kevin could probably talk a little more on the details of the actual design.
Yeah. Kevin, are there any points that you think that you'd like to highlight here?
I think Guy hit them all. The main thing is, like Guy said, elevating that trail so that we have drainage on both sides of it, so it doesn't have to cross the trail anymore. It becomes a real safety issue during not only the winter and the ice, but even the summer with some of the mossy and slime buildup. So we're planning right now on these 4 cross culverts to carry that water from the south side to the north side, and then at the very low point on the east end, we'll have another storm intake that'll take all the water at the low point and pipe it into a storm sewer manhole that was installed as part of the Forever Green Road project. This one would follow the pretty much the same schedule as the Centennial Park Loop Road project. Our hope would be to start design soon and bid it this summer. And then if we get good bids, hopefully get it completed yet this fall. If we don't, it would have to be bid in the winter and built spring of 2022. But we're hopeful. This is a lot smaller project. It's currently estimated at $147,000, and it won't have a whole lot of impact to folks. You'll see some trucks going in and out of Forever Green Road. That will probably be the biggest impact, and may have to close a lane there temporarily while they move trucks in and out to haul in dirt and pave the trail. But other than that, it shouldn't affect any of the homes, and it'll be a nice safety improvement for the city.
Great. Let's talk a little bit. This is obviously a smaller piece, but we do have kind of a priority list. This is a map. Ryan put this together of our current trail network, as well as the priorities for some of those additional connections and segments. And so maybe Ryan and Guy, you might be the best to talk to this. How do can we go through some of the highlights there of what's coming and when?
Yeah, so the dark blue is the existing trail network we have in the city. And I worked with Guy to try to identify, as Guy puts together his capital improvement programs. I mean, we try and program these things out for at least 5 years and probably a little bit longer as we're trying to think about these projects. So working with, and then the light blue is trail connections. And obviously number 2 is the reconstruction we just talked about, but the light blue are kind of filling in those gaps that we need to kind of work to complete our trail network in the city. And so, I'll let Guy get into the specific projects, but obviously 1, 2, and 3 is red. Those are what we're looking at as our very high priority, and the yellows are the mediums, and then the greens are kind of our long range plan. But this is a useful tool for me of just trying to first identify where is our what I consider our primary trail network. Where are the connections that feed into it's kind of like a roadway network, right? You've got your main thoroughfares, and then you have your connections to those. And then you get your more neighborhood scale stuff. And so this has all of it. But, seeing something like this visually helps us identify where we need to identify where those gaps are, and they need to be filled in.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that when you folks approach this and prioritize these, right, we're looking for what's the best bang for our buck. And sometimes just a short segment can open up a whole new chunk of trail to a whole new chunk of people.
Yeah, and to be honest, we're working with the developer right now for a subdivision east of the southern part of Arlington Ridge subdivision, and that presented itself as an opportunity potentially. We're still kind of working through it of an opportunity to connect a trail from the Dubuque Street Trail to make its way over to North Liberty Road, and that's not something we really had really put much thought into. But you have these developers, and this is something that the developer kind of offered up as this trail connection because I think they see the benefit it has for their development to have this extensive trail network in right next to their subdivision.
Well, great. Unless there's anything else we want to add when it comes to our trail network, I just want to we've got a few questions in the chat right now as well as a few that came in before that. Let's start with some of the back at Penn Meadows. A couple questions about. We answered the question about pickleball courts. Are there other facilities for tennis that folks might be able to use even temporarily during the construction guide? Or we might maybe work out what kind of potential possibilities we have there. So.
I do believe as a Liberty High, I believe they have a tennis court that people have been going to with, so I would assume that might be a backup. Now the pickleball group, they meet in the wintertime at the rec center and play on the gymnasium. I would assume that might be a backup plan for them also to use our gymnasium.
Great. Let's see. Other cover of questions about, we talked about how this will benefit the ice rink. A couple of questions about trail lighting, and I think this connects to sort of lighting in the park as well as trail lighting. What are the plans? Do we have concrete plans yet for lighting any of the trail sections, or when that might happen, or if that's on tap?
Sure. We have been working on doing possible solar lighting along our trail, our main bike trail that would extend from Zeller Street clear down the Forever Green Road. We almost had it there, but we had to divert money at the time because the dog park became an idea, and so we had to divert money at that time. Yeah. But it's still in the front. We're continuing to work for the funding for trail lighting. We know it's very important, but we are looking at doing solar lighting as much as possible.
And we've been talking. The council's been talking at that level about other ways to fund additional park projects, and so that's of interest, and that's on tap. And again, so many of these things we've got a long list of priorities, and some of them are being delayed based on financial impact. But we're looking at ways. Council's looking at ways to increase sort of the speed at which we can move through some of these lists. Another question. What about the possibility of adding a full court basketball court at some point to Penn Meadows? Is there a plan or discussion about that, Guy?
Not particularly for Penn Meadows Park, but it's a good. I mean, it's a good idea. I have contemplated maybe adding basketball hoops to the tennis court.
Yeah. Because
the hard surface is already there, and the cost would be relatively small. We can add hoops there, so that's an idea. But yeah, it's not out of the question. We might be able to fit something in, as far as the court, but it does get expensive because it's quite a bit of hard surface.
Yeah.
And Nick, I guess the one thing I'd like to add too is, as we look at our park system throughout the community, right? It's not static. We kind of, as we have the trail map, right? We have a map that we use to identify gaps of where we want additional park space. And so, one is kind of along Penn Street there. And I know Guy and I have talked a lot about because Penn Meadows is getting kind of crowded, being able to move some of that programming over there if we find the space. And it's not just as easy as saying, okay, we're gonna go out and identify this piece of land and we're gonna get it. Typically that kind of works out as you have like a developer that comes forward with the land with a piece of property they want to develop, and then we're able to say, okay, we'd like to acquire some park space. And me personally, I love the idea of a full court basketball court, by the way. And I think something that has a little bit more space like that would be ideal for that.
No, that's a really good point. And when you talk about sort of this evolving nature of parks, Penn Meadows Park is a great example. Right, it's one of the oldest big parks we have here in town. I grew up in the area and remember playing soccer, right, kicker soccer games there. And obviously that's changed and it's a much less soccer focused. You can still go and do that there. But what happens at these parks sort of when these master plans evolve over time? A couple questions back to Centennial Park. A question about wind connections to the south. Now that there's homes along that south side of Centennial Park, and they have trail connections on this side. Is there a plan? Do you have a sense of when that might happen? Might that be included in the drive project? Might that be a future project? Do you have a sense of that at all, Guy?
I'm gonna let Ryan answer that because I think he has a better answer.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if you look at the Centennial map, the Preserve Part 4, which is just to the west, that's a subdivision that was recently constructed, and they extended their same sidewalks basically to the property line, right? And so there's two trail connections over there. You can see the one and the two on the south. I think it makes sense to incorporate that into the road project. But now that the Preserve Part 4 has come online, those are pretty much the residential development around the park is pretty much done. And so now it makes sense, I think, to go ahead and complete those connections, along with the loop road.
Great. One note in here about potentially additional dog waste stations at Centennial Park would be a nice add. Again, we're adding stuff in there, and right now we sort of manage porta potties through the summer. Hopefully, eventually there'll be permanent structures there, which will be a nice addition. Question for Guy. I guess is appreciative of the effort to clear trails, particularly this winter, but every winter. Are there potential ways to do snow removal that don't shave off grass and topsoil adjacent to the trails? I know that's a struggle, especially as you try to find places to put snow. So are there potential ways to do that, Guy?
Well, I wish there were.
Yeah.
The equipment we use. I mean, it's heavy. It needs to be that way just to get to move snow. So what happens when we get a good amount of snow? The edges of the trails are not as apparent, and sometimes you'll get off to the side, or you're trying to make room for more snow, which you have to get off the side to push the snow to get it away. You're going to have those high spots that do get shaved. The only thing that we can do, is to come back in the springtime and fix some of those areas and reseed. That'd be the easiest route. Now we do go out, and some of our most problem areas will take those flag markers and mark out like hazards like manholes and utility boxes and things like that. We'll try to mark out. And I have noticed, especially on my route on 240th Street, I've noticed that some of the residents have actually put out markers, which it helps and it doesn't. It helps me to see the edge, but when I'm trying to push snow farther than the edge to make room, then their markers are in the way. So it's a double-edged sword. It's hard
For sure.
this year. Yeah.
Let's see. There's a question about the trail that you mentioned, Ryan, earlier in the new subdivision that connects to North Liberty Road to Dubuque Street. Where would that be, and what would that timeline look like?
Okay, so we are south of the Arlington Ridge subdivision. There's a 25-foot strip of land that goes exactly along the south end of Arlington Ridge. So it would be in that location. It would go east from there. We right now in the preliminary design, having it come up a new road, and then it kind of goes east. And if you move your marker, Nick, above Salem Drive up there towards North Liberty Road, a little bit further north. So there's a school. actually the Iowa City School District owns that parcel right there, and they are proposing to do an elementary school. And so what we've talked about is having the trail come along the south side of Arlington Ridge, make its way into the southwest corner of the school property, go along the west side of the property, and then where you see Oak Lane Northeast, a road would be at that location and basically Hemingway Drive, connecting to Arlington Ridge subdivision. So that'd be more of a collector road, and we envision the school property being able to use that. But having the trail come in along the side, kind of like how we have Grant Elementary, and then make its way on Hemingway, and then ultimately connect up to the North Liberty Road. So you kind of look at this again when you start thinking about trail planning, and you look at this. If you're on a trail in Dubuque and you want to get over to North Liberty Road, there's really not an opportunity to do it unless you go all the way down or you go along Penn Street. And so it's kind of cool to be able to have this mid-block trail connection and kind of, for the most part, a separated space that kids can walk to school. And as far as timing, it goes along with development. And so right now the developer is talking about developing the first phase adjacent to North Liberty Road. And then that's going to take a little bit of time to sell those lots. And then when they sell those lots, then they move on to a different phase. So we're probably in that, some of it will get constructed now, but probably in that, could be 2 to 3, 4 years, depending on when the development comes online.
Well, great. Well, I think we've hit most of the questions. There's a couple pieces of feedback it looks like still in that, and I'll make sure that gets passed along to the team here. Let's see. Let me come down to the end here. So here's my contact information. If a question occurs to you after this is all said and done, or if you're watching this later and want to shoot me an email or give me a call, there's my contact information, nburgess@northlibertyowa.org, or my direct line, 319-626-5756. If you go to northlibertyowa.org/projects, that's where we post updates about projects as we go. And you can also sign up to get those emailed to you. And just one more reminder that next week we're going to be talking about this summer's really big, exciting, fun project that everybody's going to love. You're going to love to call me and tell me how much you love it all summer long. It's at Ranch Way from Zeller to Hawkeye. Again, Kevin, is this the 5th phase or the 6th phase? I'm running out of, I forget what number it is.
Phase 5, yep.
Phase 5, 5th phase, and it's a big one, as they all are. And you'll want to come and learn more about the fun that we will have on Ranch Way this summer next week. And again, we'll record that and make that available for folks as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. This will be available afterwards. And again, if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get those answers for you. Thank you so much, and have a great day. I got to figure out how to stop this now.